Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
This episode is brought to you by Organifi. You know, the one thing that literally every single diet and nutrition expert that we've had on the show seems to agree on is that we need to eat more veg and get our greens and consume all natural products. But let's be honest, how many of us actually have the time? Well, recently I had the opportunity to meet some of the folks over at Organifi, and I've been absolutely blown away by them and their product. You see, Organifi is an organic superfood green juice powder that literally covers all your nutritional bases without having to eat 5 bowls of kale. It saves you loads of time, loads of money, and a lot of chewing. And really all you have to do is add water and drink it. So to check it out and save an incredible 20% off your first order, visit Organifi.com. That's ORGANIFI.com and use coupon code SUPERHUMAN at checkout. Greetings, super friends, and welcome back to part 2 of this very, very special episode 100, where I've been analyzing and summarizing, looking back and extracting the top takeaways that I've had from every single one of our episodes. Now, if you haven't listened to the first half of this episode, where I went through 50 different episodes with way more than 50 takeaways, please go ahead and do that now before you go ahead and dive into this one. And just as a reminder, guys, stick around to the end because I'm going to be taking away my top books. I'm going to be summarizing it all, explaining to you guys really what the 5 things that nearly everybody that we've interviewed on the show seems to do. And I'm going to explain to you guys kind of what some of my favorite episodes were. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right back in to my top takeaways from episode number ... 51. Josh Felber. You guys, this episode was the first time that I was exposed to the idea of having a performance coach similar to the way that you would have a football coach. I had 2 really big takeaways from this episode. First, that checking your phone first thing in the morning is actually a terrible habit that kills your productivity for the entire day. So it doesn't just ruin your morning. And second, that coaching can be tremendously helpful even if you have your shit together. And I don't think I knew that before. Since speaking with Josh, I've actually been working with a coach regularly, and the results have been fantastic. Episode 52, Jesse Lawler. Jesse's someone whose opinion I really value when it comes to neurotropics and brain boosters and all that good stuff. Jesse helped firm up my understanding of which smart drugs do what and how they differ, which has really allowed me to do further research and personal experimentation into the topic. Episode 53, Jen Sincero. Jen had so much excitement and enthusiasm and inspiration to share in the episode. It was absolutely incredible. Jen said a couple of things that caused me to make changes in my life and in my business. One, I think I'm definitely bolder and I push through fear so much more easily. And second, she helped me understand why charging more is actually better for my clients and students. So getting over that guilt and getting rid of the mentality of charging only what I would pay has been really a huge boost in my business. And I'll continue to be using that as we increase our prices higher and higher with time. And if you're wondering why that is, well, go ahead and check out episode 53. Episode 54, Gabriel Weiner. You guys, I really, really loved Gabriel's book, and I went into this episode actually having read it backwards and forwards. If you're interested in language learning, I strongly suggest you do the same. Gabriel's language learning methodology has so thoroughly influenced me that we've actually discussed creating a course together sometime in the future. So I think there's a ton of value in that episode and in the way that Gabriel has approached language learning. Episode 55, Tero Isokaupila. This episode with a 13th generation mushroom forager turned wellness entrepreneur was chock full of massive takeaways. The big one here being that there's a whole kingdom of foods alongside plants and animals that we basically ignore. Now, that kingdom is fungi, and as I learned in this episode, there are thousands and thousands of species with tremendous health benefits. Ever since talking to Tero, I've taken cordyceps every single day, and I've been enjoying a lot of Four Sigmatics products quite a bit in my own home as well. Episode 56. This episode was a bit of fun. Daniel's a mentalist who can perform seemingly impossible feats simply by paying attention to the most minute of details. So beyond learning how to do a pretty impressive magic trick that literally anyone can do, I also learned a fair bit about psychology and the power of really listening and just how easily we can all be manipulated. Episode 57, Timo Ahopelto. In this episode, we talked to one of the advisors to Human Charger, a company whose anti-jet lag device I've come to depend on regularly. In this episode, we learned that our brains are actually light sensitive, really surprising point, and that we can dramatically influence things like depression, energy levels, and circadian rhythm simply by manipulating light exposure. And by the way, I want to remind you guys that we're doing a giveaway for this incredible device, the Human Charger, and all you have to do is email us a screenshot of your iTunes review. Okay, sorry, quick plug there. Episode 58, Joel Einhorn. In this episode, I got the chance to pick the brain of a friend on a topic of interest, Ayurveda. Not only did I learn a bit more about what exactly Ayurveda is, but I learned how science is today verifying so much of what it has known for millennia. My biggest takeaway was how much it matters really how you consume different substances. The idea that it's not the same to just take a pill versus to eat it with food or with other compounds. The example that Joel gave was incredible. Consuming turmeric powder with black pepper actually makes it 2,000 times more effective. Now, surely this is a lesson that we can apply to the entire world of diet and supplementation. Episode 59, Nirka. In this episode, we talked with someone who worked as one of Tony Robbins' top trainers for many, many years, and I think it immediately showed. The episode reinforced some of my thinking around what Tony Robinson and Nirka call limiting beliefs, and also caused me to think about what beliefs I was carrying around that are no longer actually true. I recently heard a quote that went as follows, quote, "The most important thing is this, to be willing to let go of everything you are in order to become everything you could be," end quote. I think that this episode really drove that point home for me. Episode 60, Jimmy Moore. Before talking to Jimmy, I'd played around with ketosis and low-carb dieting a little bit. Now, with that said, Jimmy gave me a number of takeaways that I refer to regularly to this day. First and foremost was the idea that when you really get into ketosis, you'll know simply by how incredibly good you feel. He equated it to a drug that nearly everyone would want to take if you could bottle it. The second thing is just how incredibly hard it actually is to get into and stay in ketosis. Since that episode, I've been a little bit more vigilant about testing myself for ketones, only to realize that more often than not, my quote, low-carb diets are not nearly low enough. Episode 61, David Allen. David is a treasure trove of productivity thinking and one of the seminal authors in the field. There were so many things that could be taken away from this episode, but my biggest lesson learned might surprise you. David talked about the importance of having capture systems and how significant or insignificant, rather, the form of capture system really is. Now, as someone who really loves organization and sophisticated systems, I had always emphasized putting things down in the right place, somewhere like Asana or the Reminders app. And as someone who teaches memory techniques, I'd more recently fallen into the habit of simply memorizing tasks or to-do lists. David actually changed my perspective on this whole thing with just one sentence, and that is, quote, "Your head is for having ideas, not for holding them," end quote. Episode 62, Sean Stevenson. You guys, I really love Sean Stevenson. Not only is his style and charisma absolutely infectious, but he and I agreed on just about everything. Now, throughout the episode, Sean reinforced my thinking on so many things, ranging from how sleep is such an important component of healing and health, to his dietary thinking, to his thoughts on exercise and how our environments shape our bodies. I was also so excited to hear about his fastidious learning regimen and how he basically used a lot of the techniques that I teach in my courses to catapult himself and his career forward using good old-fashioned lifelong learning. If I were pressed to choose really just one thing that I didn't know going into this episode, it'd have to be the fact that just a short bout of exercise in the morning, even if it's not your core workout, is extremely effective at boosting energy and actually improving sleep quality at night. As Sean said, quote, "A good night's sleep starts the moment you wake up in the morning," end quote. Episode 63, Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Now, I am the first to admit that I have some difficulty with any diet that restricts consumption of animal protein. I suppose I've just drunk the paleo Kool-Aid for far too long. However, what I did find interesting in interviewing an expert from the other side of the table was just how much similarity there was between him and other experts. Ultimately, I came to the conclusion that literally every diet and nutrition expert out there agrees on at least a few things, namely that we all need to increase fresh fruits and vegetables and decrease processed artificial foods from our diets. So ultimately, no matter where you fall on the opinion spectrum, it's pretty safe to follow at least that piece of advice. And that's one of the reasons that we're so excited to have a sponsor like Organifi for this episode, because really, no matter where you fall on the animal protein side of the spectrum, everyone can agree we all need to eat more veg. Episode 64, Dan Holtzman. Okay, guys, I have to admit, I was a bit skeptical going into this episode. I simply didn't see how juggling was in any way, shape, or form superhuman. But boy, was I wrong. In under an hour, Dan proved to me why it is, in fact, a powerful skill for rewiring and enlarging your brain, increasing physical dexterity, and actually learning anything faster. Dan shared some of his tips on how to learn physical skills so effectively and quickly, which interestingly enough, lined up with many of my own thoughts on accelerated learning, and ultimately, I think this became one of our better and more informative episodes. Episode 65, Trina Felber. In this episode, guys, we talked with an expert on natural skincare and hygiene to explore my own interest in how modern cosmetic products, unregulated by the FDA, are negatively affecting our health. Now, my big overall takeaway from the episode was really just how easy hygiene was before our diets and our environments and lifestyles changed so much. I came away with an understanding of how important our skin really is, even for us guys, and the body's first and most important defense, and that we need to feed it and care for it the way that we care for the rest of our bodies. Based on Trina's wisdom, I've actually changed nearly all the products that I use day to day, and I continue to look for more natural products to keep in my home. Episode 66, Jessica Richman. Truthfully, guys, I went into this episode with a good bit of knowledge and interest around the microbiome, but this episode easily doubled that knowledge. We talked about the vast number of diseases and maladies caused by microbiome imbalances, the proper protocols for nurturing and monitoring your microbiome, and so much more. I came away with an understanding that the microbiome is so much more important in our health toolkit than any of us realize, and also that it's actually citizen science that's going to help modern scientists make advancements into understanding it. Episode 67, Alexander Hein. In this episode, I got to geek out with a fellow habits enthusiast on what it actually takes to change your habits and therefore change yourself fundamentally. Coming from the background of weight loss, Alex had a lot of interesting and powerful insights into how habits work, and he even shared some useful tips on how to implement numerous habits at once by changing the narratives we tell ourselves. Episode 68, Karan Bajaj. In this episode, I had the opportunity to talk to someone that took a full year off to meditate, travel, and explore his own consciousness. Listening to him tell his story, there were a few really big takeaways. First and foremost, the importance of regularly experiencing discomfort, both for mental discipline and also just to remain thankful for the things that you have. Karan explained how he'd become too soft and comfortable in his day-to-day life, and that by stripping himself of comforts and living nearly as a beggar in various meditation centers, he was able to get rid of all the mental and emotional clutter and find true clarity. In addition to all this, he shared some valuable insights into meditation that continue to influence my own practice. Episode 69, Mark Channon. I always love the opportunity to connect with other experts in the memory space, both because I always learn something new about my own work, and also it just reaffirms everything we're doing to show that someone like Mark, a grand master of memory, is using the same techniques we teach people every single day. One of the most powerful things that I didn't know going into the episode, though, was just how far and wide mnemonic techniques can be used. Mark told the story of a client he works with who's a swimmer and how mnemonic techniques helped him improve his performance. I also received some takeaways and ideas for how I can improve my own memory trainings by doing some of the things that Mark does so well, such as encouraging people to test their own knowledge early and often. Mark and I continue to be in touch, and I'm so glad that running this podcast allows me to make friends of folks that would normally be considered competitors. Episode 70, Linda Levine. I've known Linda since I was about 3 or 4 years old, so you wouldn't think that there would be much left hidden between us. And yet, this episode uncovered a lot. First, I heard the full story of how her life was transformed in an instant the day she was nearly killed in a stampede. From there, I gained a deeper insight into the incredible positivity that she shared with thousands of people and how she musters up so much energy and love for everyone around her. Like myself, Linda has codified a lot of her beliefs and values into rules that she lives by. Rules like giving back, asking questions, being grateful, and not working herself to the bone. And looking at these values and principles, it was so incredible for me to see just what made her the incredible woman that I know and love. Episode 71, Joe D. DeStefano. Jesus, this guy is tough. Throughout the course of the interview, I gained an insight into the mind of someone who helps people torture themselves for a living through ultra-difficult endurance obstacle races. Joe's views on tenacity were eye-opening. For example, one idea that stuck with me was that it may sometimes be okay to train beyond your breaking point in order to find where the limits are and push the body to improve next time. Joe believes that anytime we stop pushing our limits, those limits diminish. Ultimately, I came to realize that Joe and the people who run his races simply have more mental tenacity than any of us, but that ultimately, that tenacity can be trained. Episode 72, Ron White. Once again, in this episode, I had the opportunity to chat with a top-ranking memory champion. As expected, Ron and I agreed on most aspects of mnemonic techniques and training, but perhaps the most interesting part of the conversation was our discussion on long-term memory. See, oftentimes people expect that with mnemonic techniques, you can learn something once and never forget it. And as Ron and I discussed in the episode, this simply isn't true. And it was really great to hear from one of the world's top memory experts that, in fact, you need to consistently review information that you're learning if you want to remember it, albeit in a smarter way than your average learner would do. Ron also shared some fascinating tips on training under duress, and like me, he believes that the harder you are on yourself when no one else is watching, the easier life will be on you. What a quote. Episode 73, Ali Worthington. In my discussion with Ali, we talked about fear, purpose, and productivity. While Ali had a lot of really awesome and insightful things to say about fear and purpose, what stuck with me most was a message I've heard a few times before about productivity. Ali said that, quote, just like we have to remind ourselves to do things, we have to remind ourselves to stop doing things, end quote. She explained that once she started monitoring what she was actually doing during the day and cutting the fat, she was able to cut down to a 3 or 4 hour workday. Pretty cool, and definitely something that I've worked to since and had a lot of success with. Episode 74, Wim Hof. Wow. Just wow, you guys. If you were to ask me which of our guests was the most superhuman in the classical sense, I wouldn't hesitate in telling you it was Wim Hof. No other guest has come close to the level of sheer physical superpowers and then be able to teach so many others to do the same. Wim, who's affectionately known as the Iceman, has nearly 30 Guinness World Records. He can survive hot, cold, neurotoxins, and so much more, simply with a powerful breathing technique. He's also actually an incredible super learner, speaking something like 9 languages. Throughout the episode, he explains exactly how his technique works and what else it can do for your body, your mind, and your life. So my big takeaways were twofold. One, you can do unbelievably powerful things to your body without any kinds of drugs or devices. And two, to quote Wim, nothing is as good as the noble cold, at least when it comes to health. Episode 75, Jeff Sanders. Let me be the first to say, guys, that there is no way I'm waking up at 5 a.m. Now, with that said, I still found our episode with Jeff Sanders, the author of the 5 a.m. Miracle, to be insightful and valuable. As Jeff says, quote, just simply waking up early doesn't mean anything by itself, end quote. And in fact, it's the intentionality behind it that makes it work. Jeff advocates a system where you carefully and deliberately plan your days on paper and then execute them. In that, I do see a ton of value, and it's something I really want to focus on doing more of in 2017. Episode 76, Chris Ashenden. What an incredibly cool guy. The founder of Athletic Greens, Chris and I had a chance to geek out a bit on nutrition and discuss why so many people are lacking the most important nutrients in the human diet. I really enjoyed Chris's take on nutrition and his no BS approach, and I definitely learned a lot about nutrition at the cellular level. Above all, though, I found it incredibly fascinating just how he developed so much knowledge about nutrition, about marketing, about entrepreneurship, and then he used that knowledge to propel himself forward in life. Chris spent about 15 to 20 hours a week reading for 3 long years. And well, the results show. His company today is one of the juggernauts in the health supplement industry, and he's respected by such greats as Tim Ferriss for his incredible health and nutritional wisdom. It just goes to show you guys that there are incredible things that you can do if you just pick up a book, and then another, and then another. Episode 77, Neil Pasricha. I really love Neil's energy and enthusiasm, and it shows that, well, he writes about happiness. But beyond just the insights from his book, The Happiness Equation, Neil shared a lot of valuable insights into life and finding your way in this big, crazy universe. The one that most stuck with me is a little piece of advice that I've actually repeated many times to friends in transitionary periods in your lives. Quote, the longer you hold your breath underwater, the more interesting a place you come up. End quote. In essence, this means that we shouldn't rush through the transitions in our lives, and if we trust the process and explore deeply and fully, we'll end up in much more interesting places, and that's certainly been my experience. I also like the idea that any money you have left at the end of your life is wasted, either because you didn't get to enjoy it or because you wasted time earning it. Pretty neat idea. Episode 78, Coulter Merrick. Coulter is a friend that I met way back in 2015, and I was so excited to get to share his incredible wisdom and knowledge with the audience. Coulter's an expert in all things herbal, and through his company, Elixart, he developed some incredible concoctions. Now, there were too many learning points to mention from this episode, from new roots and plants that I'd never heard of to the various ways we can use plant medicines in our lives. My biggest two takeaways are perfectly encapsulated in two quotes from Coulter. The first one, quote, "There's so many treasures of nature out there to bring into your life," end quote. So, as he says, quote, "form your relationship with nature." Episode 79, Rabbi Moshe Miller. In this episode, I definitely stepped a bit outside of my comfort zone and outside of the standard types of topics we cover on the show to try and get a bit of a better understanding on the mystical world of Kabbalah. And let me be completely honest with you guys, I still don't fully understand what Kabbalah is. But perhaps the piece that most resonated with me about what Rabbi Miller said was the idea that every single person on this planet is here for a purpose. The most important thing in life, then, is to discover what that purpose is as soon as possible and to pursue it with everything that you've got. This is something that's come up in my life time and time and time again, and I have to say, I couldn't agree more. Episode 80, Dr. Mark Hyman. It was such an incredible honor to interview someone as respected as Dr. Hyman. And while he said a whole host of incredible and interesting things that really resonated with me, perhaps the biggest and most important thing I learned was that there's a whole field of medicine outside of the traditional medicine that we're all used to. This field, called functional medicine, is aiming to take a more holistic approach to actually helping people be healthy and happy rather than just treating symptoms. It's something that I ultimately think is incredibly needed in our society, and largely because, as Dr. Hyman noted, we are probably the least healthy generation in all of human history. Dr. Hyman's mission and vision are truly something to be lauded, and I was so inspired by the broad reach he's had and hopes to have with this future work. Episode 81, Aubrey de Grey. Right off the bat, guys, I realized that this interview was going to be one of the most interesting and intense I'd ever done. That's because Aubrey, one of the world's top authorities on aging, doesn't view aging and death like you and I. He views them as just another problem, another disease that medical science can and should cure. And what's even wilder is he managed to convince me that there's a logical and ethical reasoning behind curing aging. The episode was incredibly sciencey, and it's actually been an audience favorite ever since. Episode 81, Eric the Trainer. With Eric the Trainer, I had the opportunity to interview someone who literally helps celebrities become, or at least look like they've become, superhuman. Eric shared the many surprising ways that this is done, and interestingly enough, the different types of bodies that he can actually craft. I found it interesting how Eric sees the human body almost as a canvas or a medium for modification and expression. Above all, I think what most shocked me was how quickly he's able to achieve results, often in a matter of weeks, using very unique and very specific training and dietary regimens. Episode 83, Dr. Dan Engel. As you probably heard if you listened to the episode, I had an incredible bond with Dr. Dan Engel. Over the last year, I've really been fascinated with plant medicines, psychedelics, and other forms of spiritual exploration, and this episode took my knowledge and understanding to the next level. It put a lot of my own experiences into context, it warned me against other types of experience, and I feel made me better equipped to support other people in my life who are on this same trajectory. The big takeaway? that someone classically trained in psychology with a medical degree places so much trust and so much support in psychedelics and their healing power. So much so that he's dedicated his entire career to it, and he's not the only one. Overall, guys, I feel that plant medicines and psychedelics are going to play a very important role in the mental health and spiritual health of future generations. And so for me, this was a really important episode to create for all of you. Episode 84, Tiffany Cruikshank. In this episode, I got the chance to clear up some misconceptions and misunderstandings about yoga. I finally understood why yoga and meditation are separate and why yoga is so important and so cherished by so many people. Put simply, it's one of the best ways to reconnect to your body, something that I agree many people desperately need. Tiffany also recommended some fascinating books that I'm looking forward to checking out. Episode 85, Jason Gaynard. Jason's story is absolutely incredible, and it's a testament to the power of relationships. Growing up, I was always told by my father that what you have in your pocket, anybody can take, but what you have in your head, nobody can. After talking to Jason, I realized that the same is true of your social network. No matter how dark things got for Jason, his strong friendships with some of the most influential and inspiring people on the planet proved to be the thing that transformed his life. It's absolutely incredible, and it's definitely something that I'm looking to emulate in my life. Episode 86, David Heinemeier Hansson. This was another episode where I was simply blown away, almost speechless. David has risen to prominence in so many different fields, from software development to entrepreneurship to publishing and even race car driving. I was incredibly eager to get inside his head and figure out how he does it all. What I loved most of all, though, was the overlap that I saw between how he learns, works, and lives and the things that I teach both in my learning and productivity courses. Nearly every word out of his mouth was pure gold, incredible and earth-shattering wisdom. And honestly, guys, I'm not even exaggerating. In fact, this episode was nominated and might win, don't know at the time of this recording, Best Podcast of 2016. So very exciting, and seems that a lot of people agreed. Now, if I had to pick one thing that stood out to me as new and valuable, I'd have to say that it was David's focus on, quote, developing an eye for something during the learning process. Getting to the point where he intrinsically understands things without thought, whether it be pinning down something wrong in a line of code or understanding the geometry of a turn on the racetrack. That process of making something second nature is something I really want to research more and add to my own courses in the future. Episode 87, Derek Rydall. This interview gave me a pretty interesting and new perspective. You see, for as long as I can remember, my approach to self-improvement has been to add to myself and my knowledge, to grow, to expand, to acquire, to absorb like a sponge. David, on the other hand, takes the opposite approach. His core message was the idea that you already have everything you need within you, like the acorn contains everything you need to make a massive oak tree. Though I'm not 100% sure I agree with this, I do think it's an interesting approach and an even more interesting metaphor. Perhaps, like the acorn needs water, carbon dioxide, and sun, we need books and learning and experience, but perhaps, as Derek suggests of the acorn, we already contain everything that we need to become towering, sky-high versions of ourselves. Episode 88, Dr. David Orman. In this episode, I wanted to talk to someone with some experience and knowledge about qi and energies and things like Eastern medicine in order to contextualize some pretty powerful and mystical experiences that I had over the last year. This episode ultimately didn't answer the big questions, but it did give me confidence that indeed there is something out there, and indeed my observations and suspicions are pretty spot on. David was able to draw in quantum mechanics to explain concepts like chi and the flow of energies in the body and in the universe. And while I don't understand all of this any better than anyone else alive today, I do feel much more at peace knowing that it's out there and that it's a big question mark for now. Episode 89, Craig Ballantyne. I really enjoyed my episode with Craig Ballantyne, and he's someone that I admire a great deal for the incredible businesses that he's been able to build. My biggest takeaway from this episode was the idea that there are 5 distinguishable elements behind any successful personal transformation. A lot of times we think about one specific cause or catalyst. For example, someone quitting smoking when their child is born or starting to meditate after having a heart attack. But Craig helped me realize that in nearly every case, there are a total of 5 elements. Those 5 elements are proper planning and preparation, social support, professional accountability, meaningful incentives, and finally, a deadline. Going forward, I plan to be much more conscientious about making sure that I have all 5 of those things in place before attempting any kind of personal transformation on my own. Episode 90, Alex Sharfin. This episode was actually one of our best received, with dozens of you guys writing to me and expressing how transformational it had been for you. Heck, one of you guys even quit your job after listening to it. So in that, I realized that I shouldn't shy away from hosting entrepreneurship and business guests on the show. But beyond that, it reinforced something that I've been feeling and shifting towards for the last 2 years. This idea that radical honesty is, contrary to what many believe, the best way to really succeed in your personal and professional life. Alex's entire incredibly successful career was made possible basically by the fact that he was the only person in the room willing to call it like it is and have the hard conversations, even when everyone else was lying or telling half-truths to save face. I, too, have come to learn that even the whitest and most well-intentioned of lies is a setback in my life, though it often feels like it'd be easier and more productive to lie or be political. Hearing Alex's story reinforced a core value that I've been increasingly proud of, to be completely honest to everyone all the time. Episode 91, Why Learning is the Only Skill That Matters. This episode was a real opportunity to open up with you guys and tell my story in a way that I've never told it before. It was also a look into why learning matters to me so much, and why I believe that learning is the true key to literally anything that you want in your life. And I think so many of our guests have demonstrated that. Now, I was worried that you guys wouldn't like this episode since it was shorter and it was just me talking, and I thought you guys might feel like it was one big advertisement, but instead, I actually received a whole host of messages asking me to do more episodes featuring my own thoughts and ideas. So, first of all, I hear you guys, and I definitely plan to do many more such episodes going forward, and of course, this is one of them. Episode 92, Chris Kresser. Poor Chris had such an unfair task thrust upon him in this episode. He actually had to bring something new and exciting to the show, even after we'd interviewed so many of the top brass from the paleo movement. But fortunately, he was very much up to the challenge. You see, Chris's major message was that the paleo diet can not only keep you healthy, but in fact can reverse a whole host of nasty diseases that otherwise require serious medical intervention. Now, as one of the top clinicians in the community, he also opened my eyes to a more flexible and pragmatic approach to paleo that I think could perhaps welcome many more people into the fold. All in all, this episode even further reinforced my already strong belief in the paleo diet by teaching me that it can and should be adapted for everyone, especially those suffering from disease. Episode 93, Stephen Folks. This episode was a fun opportunity to chat with a fellow biohacker and cognitive science enthusiast. While the episode was mostly about Alzheimer's prevention and cognitive enhancement, my biggest takeaway was actually this. I've been waking up with the wrong color light every morning. See, I thought that since white light suppresses melatonin at night, that it would help wake you up in the morning. But actually, since then, I've been experimenting with more red-rich white light in the morning, and so far, the results have actually been pretty promising. Episode 94, Ryan Muncie. I really loved chatting with Ryan, and I love the passion and intention that goes into the products his company makes. We talked about a vast number of topics, but two of them really stuck with me. First, I learned that there's actually a test to determine which chemical is more dominant in your brain and in your neurochemistry. And second, I learned that there are actually 6 axes of abdominal movement that if you want to have a strong, ripped core, you need to train them all, not just the one axis that most people usually train. And I guess I'd have to also add, I learned that there is a different type of magnesium that can also improve cognitive performance. Episode 95, Ollie Richards. Ollie Richards is a close friend of Anthony Metivier's and someone that I've really been hoping to get to know for a long time. Ollie's approach to hacking languages surprised me most in the areas that he doesn't hack them. You see, whereas so many experts, myself included, bash language learning textbooks as archaic and old school and boring, in fact, Ollie bases his entire method on finding the right kind of high quality book and then hacking the way that you use and apply it. This actually caused me to realize that in my own study of Russian, I completely neglected to even find a textbook, which was probably a very big mistake. Episode 96, Luke Tybersky. In this episode, I wanted to learn about the type of mental tenacity that it takes to do something like a 2,000-kilometer triathlon. And while I may never understand how Luke actually does it, what I did learn is this. It's fully possible to train your mind to become much stronger than your body. And at that point, only physical limitations can stop you. Absolutely incredible. Episode 97, Jaakko Halmetoja. I really like Jaakko. His enthusiastic and geeky energy around biohacking matches my own, and he just has so much wisdom to share around non-traditional superfoods that I can't wait to pick his brain again and read his upcoming book. Though Jaakko and I went in depth on a lot of different foods and practices for hacking the body, my big takeaway was probably that it's more about the big picture, the overall lifestyle and mosaic of what you eat and how you live, than it is about adding one specific compound or nutrient or behavior to your regimen. Episode 98, Justin Stenstrom. I spent a lot of time in my life thinking about confidence and self-esteem versus egoism and arrogance and trying to find that perfect balance. Probably my biggest takeaway from Kevin's interview was the idea that everyone has confidence within them on some area or facet of their lives. And it's really just a matter of learning to bring that out in an authentic way in more and more areas of our lives. Personally, it's been my experience that confidence and self-esteem are learning challenges, just like everything else in life. And so I really liked Justin's approach. Episode 99, Drew Canole. Wow, you guys. Drew Canole. Well, I have to say that my first lesson in this episode was really more about podcasting than anything else. I learned not to put guests in a box or try and channel them into talking about the one subject that they're most known for, which I think is something I do way too often. Drew and I were scheduled to talk green juice and nutrition, and if it weren't for one of his colleagues, Shauna, pushing me to actually dig deep into his life and his story, it probably would have remained hidden. Instead, what I got was an incredibly deep and rewarding episode that covered all kinds of subjects, from leadership to personal transformation to business, and of course, we even got to nutrition. Probably my biggest and most comforting takeaway from the episode had to do with something I've been struggling with recently around dreamlike states and confusing your dreams with reality. I found it so comforting to hear someone as successful as Drew state that for him, there's no difference, and that he manages to live as happy and as successful a life as he does, even with an incredibly blurry line between waking life, and dreams. So there you go, guys. A summary of the biggest and most important things I've learned throughout the 99 episodes leading up to this one. If I had to say what I've learned in recording this episode, it's that doing the episodes is a hell of a lot more fun than summarizing them. And I hope I never have to talk for 2 straight hours again, but I hope you guys really, really benefited from those summaries so far. You might actually be wondering which episodes stood out. Well, here are my top 10 episodes in no specific order. Gretchen Rubin, Chris Bailey, Rob Wolf, Nick Littlehales, Tero Isokaupila, David Hannemeyer Hansen, Drew Canoli, Wim Hof, Derek Sivers, and Dan Engel. Those really were the episodes where I say to myself, oh my gosh, it's worth all the time, it's worth all the money, it's worth all the work that goes into producing these episodes just for being able to have had those 10 conversations, not to mention the 90 other incredible ones. Now, you might also be wondering about all the books mentioned in all the episodes. We've learned that so many of our guests are avid readers, and probably 150, 200, maybe even 300 different books have been mentioned on the show. So which ones have I actually read, and which ones do I recommend? Well, here are my top 10 books that have been mentioned on the show. And by the way, guys, if you want links to these specific episodes or links to these books, you can always check them out on the podcast. So here's a list of the 10 books that I've read that have most impacted me. The first is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. The second is an old classic I've always loved, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. The next one is The E-Myth Revisited. Number 4, we have Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Of course, I have to mention The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss and A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I want to also throw in there Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer, a controversial one, Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan and Casilda Jetha, and finally, The Paleo Solution by Rob Wolf. And as you guys know, I'm such a huge fan of everything Rob does. So how would I sum it up? I mean, what would I take away? How would I crystallize all of the incredible wisdom that nearly 100 of the world's most impressive humans have given us, have shared over the last 2 years, and put it into some actionable and practical advice that you can act on today? Well, here are some of the themes that jump out at me. You see, I've realized that the world's healthiest, happiest, and successful humans do the following things. First, they read books. And they read a lot of books. Nearly all of our guests have had a reading habit, even the elite athletes. And in fact, many of them admitted to reading more than a book a week. In fact, some of them read 3 to 4 books a week. And they spend intensive periods of their lives reading dozens of books on rapid fire. These people also meditate, one way or another. That's the second really big standout. You see, the vast majority of our guests had some form of meditation or mindfulness practice. Some did it for spiritual reasons, some did it for productivity, but nearly all of them took time, most if not every day, to pause and focus on the present moment. And if you guys are interested in learning how you too can do that, you can check me out on YouTube, and I have a full video explaining for free all the fundamentals, everything that I've crystallized over the last 2 years, and basically the quick way to start meditating correctly. The world's healthiest, happiest, and successful humans also eat real food, and they avoid garbage. So many of our guests have agreed with the same dietary advice that you probably don't even need me to repeat it. It goes like this: eat lots of fruits and veggies, avoid processed crap, and in summary, pay attention to what goes in your mouth, and you'll be very pleased with what comes out of your mind. The world's top superhumans also think deliberately about their actions and their goals. Most of our guests talked about having plans, goals, and structure around their activities. Very few of them ended up where they were by accident. This goes to show that the most successful people take time to visualize how they're going to get where they want to go. Finally, nearly everybody we talk to pays very close attention to their words, especially the words that they speak to themselves. Have you ever noticed that there's almost zero negativity on the show? Very, very few of the guests have ever had negative comments to say about others or themselves. And that's not just me editing it out. It's the way that these people tend to be. This goes to show that the most successful people understand the power of their words and the power of positive thinking. In fact, a lot of the guests pointed to me towards the importance of having healthy and positive conversations with yourself, and even more of them pointed to gratitude exercises and journaling as an invaluable tool. Whether you want to call it limiting beliefs, you want to call it the law of attraction, you want to call it the law of abundance, so many different people paid very close attention to the words coming out of their mouths and the words and narratives that are going on in their heads. So that's all for now, guys. I can't say it was easy. I can't say that I enjoyed every second of work to get up to this point, but I can say that it's been a heck of a lot of fun. And what makes it so worthwhile for us is getting all your messages, tweets, reviews, emails, letting us know that, you quit your job or you solved this health issue that's been plaguing you. That makes it all worthwhile. And I really want to thank all of you guys for tuning in every week. I want to thank all of our guests thus far for sharing their time and their wisdom. If you could, guys, please take a quick moment to share with us your absolute favorite moment or takeaway or episode. You can do that on Twitter, where we're at GoSuperHuman, or you can do that on our Facebook page. And while you're at it, let us know what you'd like to see for the next 100 episodes, and just maybe, guys, we will make it happen. So this is Jonathan Levy signing off and thanking you guys so much for your time, your attention, and your support. All right, super friends, that's it for this week's episode. We hope you really, really enjoyed it and learned a ton of applicable stuff that can help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If so, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you found this podcast. In addition to that, we are always looking for great guest posts on the blog or awesome guests right here on the podcast. So if you know somebody, or you are somebody, or you have thought of somebody who would be a great fit for the show or for our blog, please reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.